Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for coming to our candidates forum for District 46. My name is Ernest. I am the president of the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association. This forum has been put together by a group of presidents of various neighborhood associations within District 46. And I will let them introduce themselves or wave their hands or whatever when the time comes. So before we get started, I just want to do a couple of introductions and also lay the groundwork, because I know that some of you who are coming here, you may not be political junkies like me. So just wanted to lay out what this election looks like and what we are here for. So each district in Maryland has one state senator and 3 delegates. Okay, now your state senator in District 46 is Senator Bill Ferguson. I understand he's on here. If he'd like to unmute himself and wave and say hi for a little bit.
Hello there. Thank you, Ernest. Thank you, everyone. It's an honor of a lifetime to represent you all, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight with my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. Now, Senator Ferguson is running unopposed. So we are technically not supposed to endorse anybody in this forum, but I guess I kind of like Bill's chances here. He will be available, I suppose, for a little bit, but we are here because you have a choice of 3 delegates to vote for in District 46. And in the Democratic primary, there are 6 candidates. Now, in the Republican primary, there are 3 candidates, which means that if you are voting in the Republican primary, your choice is moot. There is only 3 candidates. There's only 3 potential slots you can vote for. Your choice is already made. Now, we are here for the candidates in the Democratic primary. And, you know, there are 2 incumbents here. Those are Luke Clippinger and Robin Lewis. Now, just because they are the incumbents does not mean that they automatically win. It doesn't mean that you have to vote for them. There are, in fact, enough candidates here that you could vote for a completely clean slate of 3 complete newcomers, and that is a valid choice should you decide to do so. I am not here to tell you how to vote or who to vote for. We're here to have a discussion and for you to get as much information as you can so that you can make an informed decision. Now, the format is that we are going to do a series of pre-selected questions. For the first question, which is the opening statement, each candidate will have 2 minutes. And then for each subsequent question, each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer. If there is a question that you really want to ask, don't worry, you will get your chance, because after the formal portion is done, we are going to set up breakout rooms, in Zoom. And there you will be able to go and talk individually with each of the candidates and talk to them about whatever is on your mind. As for timekeeping, this is how it's going to work. I am going to be using the chat, and before each question, I am going to be laying out a randomized order of each candidate. This is so that we don't end up doing the same order for everybody, and one candidate doesn't always end up talking after the same other candidate. And in fact, I'll go ahead and do that right now. So you can see here, this will be the order of the opening statements, and I will be keeping the time. That is my responsibility. For most of the other questions, because I'm going to be working with the time, I don't have the bandwidth to also ask the questions at the same time. So my fellow presidents will be handling the asking of the questions. I am going to be using the chat in order to keep time. So you'll be seeing me post, 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, 10 seconds left. I do have the mute ability. I really don't want to use it, so don't make me, but I will enforce the time strictly. So please keep to your time. Let's be respectful of everybody's time. And if you want to expound on anything more, you will have a chance to do so in the breakout rooms afterwards. Okay, so with that being said, we're going to go ahead now. And these are the opening statements from each candidate. You will have, as I said, 2 minutes for each. And according to our randomizer here, the first candidate to speak will be Mark Adelson. So, Mr. Adelson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Ernest. It's great to see you all and to be with you tonight. Thanks so much for putting together this forum. For the past 5 years, I have been the president of the Canton Community Association. I'm also the co-founder and chair of the Canton Anti-Racism Alliance, which is a grassroots organization that is filled with dedicated community members that was created back in 2020 to forge a more welcoming, inclusive, and diverse Canton neighborhood. And I'm proud to say that the Alliance was instrumental in having the statue of Captain John O'Donnell, a known enslaver, removed from the square in the middle of Canton. I'm also a lawyer and partner at the law firm of Silverman Thompson downtown. I represent clients including many of our small independently owned businesses in our district, all the way up to complex securities litigation matters. I have represented the victims of lead paint poisoning in our city. I also do a lot of pro bono and civil rights work, particularly in the area of public transportation. In fact, I was the lead attorney in the case against Mayor Pugh to prevent the demolition of a protected bike lane in Southeast Baltimore. I'm an educator and an adjunct professor at Goucher University. I am an elected member of the Democratic State Central Committee. I was elected to represent our district back in 2018 and have been vice chair of our delegation since then. And finally, if elected, I would be only the fourth foreign-born immigrant serving us in the House of Delegates. I moved to America when I was 15 with my parents and my youngest sister from South Africa. When we moved, we said goodbye to everything we ever had and everyone we'd ever known in search of the American dream. I'm running for this position to ensure that everyone in our district has access to the American dream.
Okay, I'm sorry. I might have dropped out there. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you. So next up is
Okay.
Augusta.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to all of the neighborhood association presidents who came together to put this on. I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. My name is Augusta Christensen. I'm a lifelong Democrat, product of Maryland Public Schools, and I'm running for state delegate here in the 46th district. I'm running because I love Baltimore, and I want to tell you a little bit about where that love began. My love for the city really started with one of my closest high school friends, Matt. Matt used to pick me up in Bel Air, where I grew up, and whisk me away to Baltimore for adventures every week. I discovered so much of Baltimore because of him, from record stores to restaurants to house shows and strangers' apartments. Matt was one of the reasons I fell in love with Baltimore. And when he died of an opioid overdose 8 years ago, it was the only time I ever considered not moving home to Baltimore. I felt hopeless and lost, and it felt like I couldn't ever come home again. But I made it through and I got to work. I realized that the thing I'm most passionate about is helping others so they never feel the way Matt felt or what it felt like to lose him. I went to work for Donna Edwards on her US Senate race and many other Democratic women running for office. I helped more than a dozen currently serving members of the Maryland legislature build and win their campaigns, carrying our values forward with them. And I'm running to be your delegate because I think it's one of the best ways to do the most good for the most people. While Baltimore has its challenges, I really believe that with the right leadership, open communication, and a shared vision of what our future can be, we can build the kind of change that improves life for all of us. I'm no stranger to the issues facing us right now. I've lost loved ones to addiction and to suicide, so I understand the critical public health crises facing us on the heels of this pandemic. I graduated from a Maryland public school that wasn't fully air conditioned and was in horrible disrepair, so I understand how critical the need is in our schools. My best friend is a preschool teacher struggling to make ends meet, so I understand how important it is to fix our broken care industry. I understand these problems because I've lived them, and now I want to work to solve them. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Next is Luke Clippinger.
Good evening. I am Luke Clippinger. I'm one of your 3 members of the House of Delegates, along with Delegate Brooke Learman, who's running for comptroller, and Delegate Robin Lewis, who you'll hear a little bit more from here in a few moments. I am a native Baltimorean. I grew up in Reservoir Hill, where my family bought a house for $1. We were one of the dollar house families. They bought the house in 1974. I lived there until about 2015. I went away to school in the Midwest and then came back home to the city that I love. And I've been lucky to work as an assistant state's attorney for the last 15 years now in Anne Arundel County. In the legislature, I'm the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. The House Judiciary Committee deals with issues related to criminal law, civil law, family law, and juvenile law. And over the last 4 years of being chair, we've made a lot of good steps forward on issues related to guns, juvenile justice, and so many more issues that I'll talk about as we go through the evening. But I've also worked on other issues outside of the Judiciary Committee. I was the lead sponsor of the Community Solar Program that seeks to give people, especially low and moderate income Marylanders, the opportunity to generate solar electricity, even if they can't put panels on their roof, by using third-party systems to generate that electricity and charge the electricity against their bill. I was the lead sponsor of the Earned Sick Leave bill, which then led to the Family Leave bill, which we just passed in the last General Assembly. And there are many, many more things I can talk about, but as a lawyer, I also know that I've got to stick to my 2 minutes. So I look forward to speaking with you more this evening and telling you more about what we've done and what we can do to make Baltimore the greatest city in America. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Vince Andrews.
Yep. Good evening. Thank you, Ernest, and all the community organizations who are co-hosting this event. Again, my name is Vince Andrews. It's an honor to be here. I'm a former teacher at Patterson High School, located just down the street from many of your houses. And I'm a nonprofit public health attorney working to increase access to healthcare here in our state and in Baltimore, a city I love. I believe that we live in a vibrant community and that the issues that we face, from crime to addiction to generational poverty, these aren't just local city issues. These are actually state level issues, but instead of acknowledging this fact, the state of Maryland amplifies a negative narrative about our city so that it doesn't have to be a better partner in breaking the cycle that we see every day. And I know this to be true because I've dedicated my career to improving education equity and healthcare access in our society. I'm not a political insider. I'm not a partner at a law firm. I don't represent banks or developers, not because I've anything against that community, just because they're already really well represented. So instead, I've dedicated my career to working on behalf of those families who send their kids to public schools, those families who use our public healthcare system, because it's these institutions, education, healthcare, that are fundamental to breaking down the barriers of opportunity that so many of us here in Baltimore face. And this is why I was the assistant coach of the baseball team at Patterson, why I did home visits, why I'm proud to say that today I'm in-house counsel for shock trauma, and I helped design the back-end legal framework that enabled the free testing services at the Baltimore Convention Center for COVID. And it's on these ideals and this career and this knowledge and these experiences that I hope to bring to the seat. And so with that, I look forward to hearing your thoughts and any questions that you have at the end of the program.
Okay, thank you. Next is Sean Burns.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am Sean Burns, running for the House of Delegates as well. I am a Baltimore native from the Cherry Hill community. Currently, I live downtown. I'm downtown Baltimore. I am an attorney by trade, but right now I actually work and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Assistant Vice President of Government Relations for the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. So I advocate on a daily basis with our federal partners on Capitol Hill and with the federal administration on behalf of our 47 public historically Black colleges. And this is one example why I'm running, because I believe outside of the incumbents that I am the best qualified and best prepared to serve. In fact, during the COVID-19 pandemic, myself and my colleague, we secured $3.4 billion million from the federal government to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic. That addresses food insecurity, housing insecurity, the digital divide, and personal protective equipment. free testing kits. And I'm proud to say after 5 years of trying, we got a $400 increase in the maximum Pell Grant award. So now 7 million Americans can access and afford college. That's just one example. Another example of the experience that I bring to the table on day one. I had the honor and privilege prior to serving at the Thurgood Marshall College Fund of being a counsel on the oversight committee with my dear friend and our beloved Congressman Elijah Cummings. And in that capacity, I was the chief counsel on a hearing examining renewable fuel standard, which is very prevalent today, given the rising gas costs. And it's to examine, it was examining to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions. I also served as an attorney on the law offices of Peter Angelos, representing many of our families here in District 46. And also I began my career with Congress.
I'm sorry, Mr. Burns, I'm sorry, that is time.
Not a problem.
You will have time to speak some more.
Thank you,
our final opening statement will be from Robin Lewis.
Great, thank you, Ernest. Thank you to all the neighborhood presidents in the Patterson Park area. It's great to be with you, and it's an honor to serve as one of your 3 delegates. My name is Robin Lewis. I am one of your delegates here in the 46th district. I live in the Patterson Park neighborhood. I'm on Potomac Street, just north and east of the park, and I've lived in my home here for 20 years. Before moving to the Patterson Park neighborhood, buying my house here, I spent 3 years on the other side in Brewers Hill. As your delegate, I serve on the House Health and Government Operations Committee. That is the committee in the House with jurisdiction over policy matters such as health insurance, occupational health and licensing, and other related health matters, hospitals, etc. I hold a master's degree in public health from Columbia University and a bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Chicago. I was born in Gary, Indiana, grew up in the Chicago area, and before coming to Baltimore in 1999, had lived all over the world. My career in international health took me to 14 countries on 3 continents and over 20 years, and during which time I worked on infectious disease prevention projects, as well as women's reproductive rights. I became a delegate by responding to a call when the previous guy in the White House was elected. There was an opportunity to step up into this elected role. I answered that call. It's been an honor of my life to serve in this role during a time of incredible change, transformation, crisis.
I'm sorry, that is time. So
thank you.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but
that's all right. I'm used to it.
I am going to move on to the next question, and one of my fellow presidents is going to be reading the question out to you. I don't actually know who it is. Beth, do you know who it is?
That would be me.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So question number 1, crime is a problem we are all concerned about. As a state delegate, what impact could you realistically have on reducing crime in the city?
Okay, and the new random order has just been posted in the chat. Each of the candidates will now have 3 minutes. First up is Luke Clippinger.
My computer is fighting me. Thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned before, I'm the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and we've done quite a bit already to give resources to our local governments and give resources to larger organizations to try to fight back, particularly against violent crime. But not only do that, but also address underlying issues and address some of the concerns that we also need to address related to mental health, so that we can begin to break the cycle of violent crime in our communities. First, the tragedy that we saw in an elementary school today in Texas is just overwhelming. After the tragedies that have unfolded in and in Buffalo, New York, and in so many different places all the way across our country. We have a lot of work that we have to do at the federal level when it comes to how we regulate firearms. We have worked in the legislature, especially during this last session, to address a couple issues that I'll talk about here. And one of them was in beginning the process to regulate and to ban ghost guns, guns that are kits that are sold mostly over the internet, but not always. And they're increasingly in the possession of younger and younger people. We require that they meet the federal guidelines and the federal regulations that are being established by the ATF in order for somebody to possess them. We took those steps in the last General Assembly session, and in the General Assembly session prior to that, we required background checks for people who purchase long guns in the state of Maryland. We overrode the governor's veto to pass that bill. We took steps also to track the flow of illegal guns by adding funding, $2 million of funding, to the gun center at the Maryland State Police so that we can properly trace where these guns are coming from in connection with the gun audit that we passed in 2022. We also passed meaningful juvenile justice reform in the last General Assembly session that puts kids who fall afoul of the law closer to services that will work to keep them from reoffending if they commit those nonviolent crimes. But if they do things that are more serious, make sure that we put the resources into making sure that those kids not only are held responsible for those acts, but also are made sure that they get the services that they need as well. We have a long way to go forward, though. We have innovative programs out there in crisis intervention where we can move people into mental health systems as opposed to the criminal justice system. I'll talk about that a little bit more, but there's a lot that we've done and still more that we can do. And that's why I look forward to going back for another term.
Thank you. And I think I've been saying your name wrong. Is it Klippinger? Is that how you say your?
Klippinger.
Klippinger. Okay, my apologies. I understand. I've been in your type of situation before, candidates. I understand what it's like to speak under time pressure. So you have my sympathies. We are trying to keep this moving along in order to get as much information as possible. And my advice to you is, as soon as you see me post 10 seconds, just finish the sentence that you're saying right now. You're probably not going to have time to say anything more than that. Our next candidate to answer this question is going to be Augusta Christensen. Am I saying that right?
Christensen.
Christensen, okay.
Close enough for Zoom.
All right.
So crime is without question the issue that comes up more than any other when I'm speaking to voters. And every one of us deserves to feel safe in our homes, our neighborhoods, and our communities day or night. This issue affects every corner of the district. A few months ago, I was in Upper Fells Point. I spoke with a gentleman in his 80s who had been stabbed right on his front porch where I was talking to him. Just this Saturday, I attended a prayer walk in Cherry Hill organized by Shanita Barnes, who lost her son to gun violence back in February. This is a complex problem. We're seeing property crimes of opportunity increase as well as an increase in violent crimes. And the closure rate on all of these cases is incredibly low here in Baltimore. As state delegate, I would work to allocate additional funding to recreation centers and after-school programs to help reduce the number of juvenile offenders who are introduced into the judicial system in the first place. And I would also work closely with the mayor's office to expand the community violence intervention ecosystem here in Baltimore. This is going to take a sustained and coordinated response at the state level, the city level, and even the federal level. This is going to require input from everyone. And I'm committed to supporting grassroots efforts like the Safe Streets programs, as well as building stronger partnerships with hospitals, schools, and local businesses to make sure that everyone can feel safe where they live here in the city.
Okay. Our next candidate will be Sean Burns.
Good afternoon. This is an issue that is not new to me. I did not get a chance to mention in my opening statement that I had the honor of serving as Deputy Director of Governor O'Malley's Washington, D.C. office. One of the things we worked on is bringing federal funding here to the city and the state for the COPS program. And I was pleased to see that President Biden is asking for Congress to bring more additional funding for the COPS program. And hopefully Baltimore will receive those fundings in the future. I see it as a holistic approach. You may know the city of Baltimore, they're experimenting with a pilot program called Behind the Wall Initiative. And this is a pilot program. The funding expires in 2026, where they're identifying individuals 6 to 9 months before they're released. They're training them while they're behind the walls in prison. So once they actually are released, they have a job on day one. I see the role of the delegate as really being that conduit between our state partners and our federal partners and our city partners. And that's one of the programs, if I'm honored to be elected, that once the funding is over, that ends in 2026, to scale that up, working with our federal partners and getting state resources as well. Another key issue is really fully funding parole and probation. As Chairman Clippinger knows, as a prosecutor in Anne Arundel County, I had the honor and privilege of serving as Judge Marcella Hollins law clerk. So once a month, we had call it a VOP docket, violation of parole. And that's a critical component to reduce crime, because the parole and probation officers, they can flag the most violent offenders who have validated parole, and communicating with our partners at the city level, the state level, to identify those bad actors that are on the street that could potentially go back and harm someone. So you can prevent someone from being a victim and prevent somebody from committing a crime. And then we must fully fund our police athletic leagues, really engaging our youth and keeping them off the street. So it's a holistic approach that I would take to crime, and it's scaling up the programs that are working best in our society.
Thank you. Our next candidate will be Robin Lewis.
Thanks, Ernest. Now I know I have to watch the chat for your countdown warning, so that's helpful. Thank you. The first thing I'll say is that state delegates are not law enforcement officers. We do not enforce the law, and it is not in our scope of work or in our power to investigate crime, prevent crime, or anything like it. The job of the state delegate is to set state law and state policy. That is really important. And it means that rather than solving crimes, we're in the business of preventing crime. Part of our job also involves passing laws that define sentencing or punishment for certain crimes, but really we're in the business of prevention. And as a public health professional whose whole ethos is grounded in preventing the worst outcomes, I've worked over the last 5 years to pass public health oriented approaches, preventive approaches to crime. One of those includes a bill that, with Delegate Clippinger's help, I passed this session that will divert non-violent individuals who have been charged with crime to be diverted into a guaranteed job training program with a guarantee of placement. And this is an approach that's like a vaccine against reoffending and recidivism. It puts folks at risk of committing more crime on a path to a better life. The other thing I think it's important to note in conversations about crime, which people in Baltimore bandy about without any distinctions, there's violent crime, which I think a lot of people refer to or are thinking of when they use the term, and there's nonviolent crime. Violent crime is a serious issue, and I set that aside. Nonviolent crime, like property crime, nuisance, the kind of things that we deal with in cities that irritate and discourage you, but don't involve physical risk or harm or danger. Let's be real clear when we talk about those things. Violent crime is a serious issue in our city. It affects people, a specific population at very high risk, young African-American males. And what we've got to do is invest in people. We've got to build partnerships. And we have done that as your legislators, passing laws, for example, to increase state, local partnerships to investigate and solve crimes. I'll keep doing that as your delegate. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Mark Adelson.
Thanks, Ernest. I heard Delegate Klippinger give an excellent answer to this question about a week or so ago in Locust Point. And the crux of it is that there just is no one size fits all solution. And I mean, this question cannot be fully addressed in 3 minutes. As you are all extremely well aware, our public safety challenges in the city are a deeply complex set of issues, frankly rooted in generations of inadequate planning and racist policies. However, there are a number of areas in which our state delegation really can positively impact public safety. And so I'm going to focus on 2 of them. The first is one that Sean actually brought up, which is the Department of Parole and Probation. Now, this is a state agency that does not get a lot of airtime, but it should, because nearly 40% of the violent crimes committed in our city every year, either the victim or the perpetrator are on parole or probation. This agency has over 150 vacancies. It has been systematically underfunded for over a decade. It is understaffed and it is mismanaged. And the result is that we are failing to ensure that our returning citizens have access to workforce development, affordable housing, reliable transportation, and affordable healthcare. And we're failing to properly monitor and prevent them from falling back into a life of violent crime. But when an agency this critical operates this poorly, we all pay the price. I look forward to the opportunity to working to reform that department. The second is that we have got to support organizations that have demonstrated success at interrupting violence, like Safe Streets, at breaking the school to prison pipeline, like ROCA, reducing homelessness and substance use addiction, like Another Life Saved. I have spent a lot of time working with and learning about these organizations and how they achieve success. And I will say that our delegation has done an excellent job of securing funds for these organizations, but there is still a lot of work to do. I look forward to the opportunity to fight for the necessary resources for these and other local organizations that provide productive after-school activities for our youth, mental health and social work services throughout the city, much better mass transit, access to healthy fruits and vegetables in our food deserts, and those that invest in green spaces in all of our neighborhoods. Ultimately, it is going to take quality, consistent wraparound services at every level to truly move the needle. And I look forward to the opportunity to try.
Thank you. And next is Vince Andrews.
Yes, thank you. So there are absolutely 2 tracks here to addressing the issue of crime in Baltimore and in Maryland. The delegates, our current delegation, are doing a lot of work on this, and we must focus, of course, on access to education so that kids have after-school programming, kids have appropriate role models, kids are able to engage with their public safety officials, from their police officers to their firefighters, via, as Sean mentioned, the police rec leagues, so that these public safety officials can interact with the community, not in the worst moment of the community's life when folks are either the victim of a crime or they're being stopped for a crime, but in a space where trust can be built and where folks can actually get to know each other and understand that we are part of the same community. And as a teacher, again, at Patterson, now doing public health work, I want to continue on the path that I've set upon in my day job and in my career to implement and build successful policies that break down the foundation and really the inadequate services that have led to the conditions that we see here today. But there must also be a 3-year solution. There must also be a more immediate solution, because, just this weekend, somebody was shot 2 blocks from my house. The Saturday before Easter, and excuse me, I'm losing my voice, but the Saturday before Easter, a person was shot 500 feet from my front door, where my wife and I walk our dog every single day. And the reason why this violence continues is because we aren't actually catching the very small group of folks who continue to perpetuate this crime. 60% of murders in Baltimore City go unsolved year over year. 80% of violent crime year over year go unsolved in Baltimore City. And that's because communities are scared to engage in the criminal justice process. Folks are scared that if they talk to the police, they will get retaliated against. And so where I want to focus my efforts on, if elected as delegate, is to make sure that there's a civilian core of folks that goes out and engages the community so that they feel like they can participate in our criminal justice process, provide video evidence if they have it via their Ring camera, and do so anonymously if they choose, so that we can actually start tracking down and then providing an appropriate level of consequence, not increasing minimum sentences, but engaging and really figuring out the underlying reasons for these issues. And so that's what I hope to work on.
Thank you. We will move on to the next question. Please read the next question.
Okay, next question. It seems that policing occupies, hang on, my screen just went dark. It seems that policing occupies an ever increasing percentage of government budgets. What is your plan for investing in public transportation, education, and housing without impacting public safety? 3 minutes.
And I have just posted on the chat so that you can see. The first to answer will be Robin Lewis.
Thanks, Brian, for the question. So there's this aphorism that goes something like, a budget is a moral document. And that is to remind us that the place where we put our resources, in this case, our public dollars, was what we really care about. In Baltimore City, we invest most of our public treasure into the operations of the Baltimore Police Department. Is that truly what we believe is the most important, the greatest value of our public investment? It's worth asking that question, especially when we look at the outcomes that we see. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have any control over the Baltimore City budget. Mind you, that is the work of your mayor and city council persons. But as your state delegate, the way I see it, public dollars should be invested in public goods. Public goods are things that make people's lives better and that enable them to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. That means public transportation, public education, safe and healthy and stable housing. So I think we can recalibrate when it comes to how we spend our public dollars. At the state level, which is where I have authority, I have no authority over how the city spends its policing dollars, but at the state level, I've worked and put my attention towards investing in public goods. Over the last few years, I've helped to pass legislation under the Kerwin Commission, that is the education reform policy framework that will bring, I think, about $400 million to Baltimore City's education system for building new schools, for increasing teacher pay, for improving pay for ancillary education workers, and expanding access to technical and career training for students who are not college bound. And so I've done that as your delegate. I will continue to do that. I voted to pass legislation that will require the state transportation authority to pay for MTA, transit administration operations, and fill the funding gap. Those are where, those are the places we should be spending our public dollars, and I'll keep doing that as your delegate.
Thank you. Next up will be Luke Klippinger.
There are a number of things first that we did, especially in this last session of the legislature, that are going to bring more vital dollars, not only here to Baltimore, but across the state, for people who need stronger schools and need better options when it comes to transportation. As Delegate Lewis just mentioned, we passed and we fully funded the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which will be transformational for Baltimore City school students as we bring that $400 million. We did that work in this last session. We set aside in this most recent budget another $800 million statewide for the blueprint. And we increased the amount of revenue that will be ongoing revenue that goes into education funding by another 100 million. So we've taken those steps on education to begin that process. Part of that blueprint work also will be to help kids who are in mental health crisis. And we can get more services to those kids. Those kids then can get back into school, engage, and do better for themselves. We also need to look forward. One of the votes that I'm very proud that I cast as a younger delegate was to set aside the bonding authority that has built new schools all the way across this city. We see the new schools now at Patterson, at John Rura, at Holabird, at Graceland Park. We see them in Cherry Hill and then at Arundel. And we see the work that's being done now in Curtis Bay and in Highlandtown with these wonderful new buildings, these truly temples to education that are re-engaging kids and bringing them back in. I think that in the next term, we need to look at the next tranche of bonding authority so that we can begin to move forward with more options for our kids. Delegate Lewis and I both voted to create a commission for a transportation authority that can take a look at creating that regional transportation authority that may be able to better fund and better focus transportation improvements here in our city. But beyond that, we also voted, and it was passed, a higher distribution of highway user funds for Baltimore City. And we're going to go from receiving 8.3% of what jurisdictions receive, of what the entire state receives. We're going to go to 12.2% between fiscal years 24 and 27. That's another $320 million that we're going to be able to use on transportation infrastructure, on roads, and on other improvements that are vital too. Very quickly on issues related to housing, we dealt with housing issues in a lot of different contexts, but we put another $200 million in housing support in this year's budget. And then we targeted another $550 million to rental assistance programs and to other programs to help people get out of trouble with COVID.
And that's time. Okay. Next is Augusta Christensen.
So while policing is important, it cannot be the only tool we use to reduce violence in our city. And it certainly cannot be the only thing that we invest in. Improving our schools, bringing a reliable public transportation system to Baltimore, and investing in affordable housing, all of these things are critical. We have to do all of these things. Just last week, I was speaking to a teacher at Benjamin Franklin High. She told me she's still waiting on a supplies request that she put in before the pandemic. I spoke to Lakeisha, a mom in Cherry Hill. She told me that the buses often just don't show up on the weekends. That's completely unacceptable, especially in our neighborhoods where most people do not have access to a car. And on top of all of that, the cost of housing is skyrocketing. So for so much of our budget to be concentrated on policing and not other aspects of our society, other public goods, as Robin put it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So really what I would like to see is I want to make sure that we are fully funding and implementing the blueprint for Maryland's future. That includes making sure that the advisory board that is looking at how this is implemented, how it's paid for, is fully staffed and has the resources to actually meet and make their recommendations. We need to fund the Red Line with some of the infrastructure money that's coming into Baltimore. Construction on the Red Line should have started years ago. Obviously, it was canceled by our current governor. We need to get those funds back into Baltimore because we are decades overdue for a regional rail system. And I also agree with the establishment of a Baltimore area regional transport authority because we simply do not have the kind of reliable and efficient public transportation system that we should have as a major metropolitan area. And when it comes to housing, not only do we need to encourage mixed use development and get rid of single family zoning where we can, we also need to extend additional assistance and aid to renters and new homeowners so that they are not, finding themselves crushed by the rising costs.
Okay, thank you. Next is Mark Adelson.
I was going to say it's Edelson, and sorry to wait this long.
I'm sorry, I am messing up everybody's pronunciation.
I figured I would just jump on
Edelson,
that train
okay.
eventually. So
Sure.
look, in answer to your question, Augusta is exactly right. The crux of this is that we have to recognize that we cannot realistically expect to police our way out of our current public safety crisis. And if we don't increase investments in public transportation, education, affordable housing, we will never truly improve public safety. The second major part of that is money. And here's the thing, we have a state budget surplus this year of over $7 billion, which, by the way, we can use to leverage the historic $1.2 trillion federal infrastructure package. So if ever there was a time to think big and make the necessary generational investments in public transit, education, and housing, that time is now, especially with the possibility of getting a Democrat in the governor's mansion that wants to work with Baltimore City and cares about our shared future. Now, specifically in the transit area, this is an area that I've been advocating in for years, not because it's my job, not because I get paid to do it, but because I care about it. I've been doing it as a volunteer for a long time now. And it's one in which I have very specific policy proposals, all of which are laid out in detail on my website at electedelson.com. But just to throw a few out there, first, as Augusta said, we've got to revive the energy and conversations around the Red Line, or at least have a real plan for a true east-west connection running through downtown. In my vision, it also includes a water taxi station at the Middle Branch Marina in Cherry Hill, a MARC station on the east side at Johns Hopkins Bayview, and also fully investing in the Baltimore Greenway Trails Network, which no one else has mentioned, but it will result in 35 miles of world-class protected walking and bike lanes throughout our city, connecting our neighborhoods and our green spaces. And on the education piece, again, it's going to be about having the money to properly and effectively implement the excellent blueprint for Maryland's future. And here I have two creative ideas. The first is that we are very likely, as polls show, to vote in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana this year. And the second is that we've seen a significant expansion of sports betting licenses around the state. These are going to be two massive revenue streams for the state of Maryland. I think we should be working to place a lockbox on a certain percentage of these funds to guarantee that they are directed to funding the blueprint, no matter who the governor is, no matter who the legislature are, that this money goes to funding education and righting so many of the decades of wrongs of the failed war on drugs. Just like our delegation was able to accomplish in excellent fashion with the lockbox placed on the tax revenues from the Horseshoe Casino, I think we want to make sure that we have a dedicated long-term funding stream for the blueprint, and I look forward to the opportunity to work on it.
Okay, thank you. Next is Sean Burns.
Well, thank you. The answer to this question highlights what I bring to the table. I mentioned a few moments ago that I was Deputy Director of Governor Malley's Federal Relations DC office, Deputy Director of Federal Relations. I worked on as was mentioned by Augusta, the Red Line project. We need an east to west connection. And what I bring to the table is it's not what I did for a living, but it's my lived experience. If it wasn't for investments in the MARC train, I would not have the opportunity to work on Capitol Hill. Investments in public transportation break down barriers to opportunities. So working on Capitol Hill prepared me to serve as your delegate. And also when you think about, and I'm thankful for our current delegation working with Senator Van Hollen and Senator Cardin, because they put a provision in a bipartisan infrastructure bill. Now Maryland is at the top of the list when it comes to federal funding. And I worked on the Red Line project with Governor O'Malley, and that was almost $1 billion lost. We worked with Senator Mikulski on that. So this is nothing new to me. And when you talk about other federal investments, like for instance, the American Rescue Plan, when you're talking about crime, that's the city of Baltimore set aside $50 million for crime reduction in crime. That's $50 million less that has to come from the state coffers. So that's the experience that I bring to the table and ready on day one because I've done it. And I know the players, and I have the experience to hit the ground running.
Okay, thank you. And we have Vince Andrews.
Investing in education, transportation, housing, in the long run, not only improves our lives, but ends up paying for itself. And we can see the effects of the disinvestment that has happened at the state level in the areas of transportation, in the areas of education, in the areas of healthcare. And the product of that, when the state of Maryland has concentrated poverty in our jurisdiction, Baltimore City, and hasn't equitably funded these institutions. At Patterson High School, I had to wear my coat on in the classroom. We had to wear our coat on in the classroom during the winter because the heating didn't work. We couldn't drink out of the water fountains because of lead pipes. And so we really have to recognize Senator Ferguson, Delegate Clippinger, and Delegate Lewis, and really the entire team's work on the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, because it is a transformational bill and package that will have outstanding effects on Maryland, on Baltimore City in the years to come. And as somebody who has worked in this field for my entire career, something that I want to talk about tonight is actually leveraging the billions of dollars that exist in our healthcare model and our insurance industry to increase capacity in our school buildings. As we know, schools over a certain size will get a dedicated healthcare professional, a nurse practitioner, a social worker, to help manage the patient population of the students and the families. As somebody who works in healthcare today, as an expert in this field, we need to leverage our state Medicaid dollars and authorize billing for services that are provided in school buildings. Today, our state programs don't allow an ophthalmologist to see a patient or a psychiatrist to see a patient in a classroom that's HIPAA compliant and then bill for that service. It's all grant funded. And so we need to work with our federal partners, work under the Medicare waiver that we have as a state, and take these billions of dollars to enable our practitioners to go in and treat students and families in a way that's compliant and create a sustainable model that is ultimately cost neutral to the state budget as a consequence of bringing these services directly to the communities where people live. And so that's just one of the many ideas that I have on my website, vinceandrewsforbaltimore.com. We have pages and pages around transportation, housing, and so much more. So please reach out if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Before we move on to reading the next question, I did get a message from somebody who was just asking whether the candidates were given these questions beforehand. And the answer is yes, they were. They were told what the format was going to be, how much time they were going to get. And it is not our intention to test these candidates under, give them a stress test and see how quickly they think up answers while tap dancing. So they were told what the questions were going to be ahead of time so that they would have time to prepare, because we know that we're not giving them a whole lot of time to answer. So with that being said, if we could please read the next question.
All right, next question. As state delegate, how could you ensure that policy changes are enacted that would serve Baltimore despite opposition from more conservative politicians in other parts of the state? What tactics could you employ to direct much needed resources to Baltimore, potentially decreasing those directed to more affluent and more conservative areas of the state?
Okay, so next is Sean Burns, you're up.
Well, I would draw from my experience that I do right now, actually. One of the proudest legislative achievements that I had a couple years ago was to pass what is called the HBCU Partners Act. Since Jimmy Carter, there's been an executive order on HBCUs. Every president has issued one. The HBCU Partners Act was passed by law, by Congress, signed into law by President Trump, which requires federal agencies to engage with HBCUs on an annual basis come up with agency plans. That was not done by the stroke of a snap of a finger. That took hard work. It passed by voice vote in the United States Senate, which is unheard of in these unprecedented times. And like I said, President Trump signed it into law. And I'm very proud of that. And to get $3.4 billion during COVID, during a Republican Congress, that was not an easy task, to say the least. So I have a track record of working across the aisle, of getting things done. So I would just draw from my experience, and I have the track record to show that I've done it, and we'll do it again.
Okay, next is Mark Edelson. Did I get it?
Close enough.
Okay.
Ernest, I am someone that always believes you can never be too prepared. It drives my wife a little crazy at times, but that's how I am. So I've spent a lot of time researching and learning about good policy, good governance, reading about legislators that are successful and, honestly, many that aren't. And from this, I've gleaned that there are really two major skills present in every effective legislator. First is the ability to stand up for your principles and successfully make an argument even when it is unpopular. And the second is being able to build a coalition around that principle. I believe that I have demonstrated an aptitude for both of these skills. In terms of making the argument, my first major case as a lawyer was representing the victims of lead paint poisoning against the Housing Authority of Baltimore City and HUD in federal court. It was an extremely difficult and complicated uphill battle, but after years of litigation, we won. Another was the bike lane case. This was pretty politically unpopular at the time. We were going against the mayor and city council and almost every city agency seeking a temporary restraining order in the first ever case of its kind in the country to protect a bike lane. I was the lead lawyer in that case, and we won. We saved the bike lane. In terms of coalition building, I would point you to my support in this race. Community leaders from nearly every single neighborhood in our district, all of whom have their own specific, unique needs and issues, all see me as the right person to represent all of our neighborhoods in Annapolis. Community leaders in Cherry Hill, Westport, Lakeland, to Locust Point, to Otterbein, to Fells Point, to Patterson Park, to Bayview, and everything in between have publicly endorsed me in this campaign. I've been endorsed by both Harris Beanert and, as of his announcement on Sunday night, Councilman Zeke Cohen. I've been endorsed by organizations like CASA in Action, Our Revolution, AFL-CIO, LIUNA, and the American Federation of Teachers. All of these individuals and organizations support me because they know I will stand up for Baltimore City, because I have a track record of standing up for what I believe in and winning. And because they know that I can bring together the coalition necessary to be a successful legislator for our district and our city.
Okay, thank you. Next is Vince Andrews.
The way we're going to solve the big issues that exist here in Baltimore, and I say this at every door, is to acknowledge that these are not just city problems. The issue of crime is a state issue. Crime affects every jurisdiction, and it's on the rise in a significant number of jurisdictions in Maryland. The issue of addiction affects every single jurisdiction, and a lot of folks who fuel the drug trade here in Baltimore City live out in the county, and so we need multi-jurisdictional approaches. The issue of generational poverty, which underpins so much of what we see here in Baltimore, is absolutely not just a Baltimore City problem. And it's by acknowledging this fact and talking with legitimacy on these issues that we are going to build the coalitions that are needed to build the programs to break down the cycle. And my day job today as associate counsel for the faculty practices at the University of Maryland is to build multi-million-dollar healthcare programs in partnership with our hospitals, in partnership with our state entities, so that we can provide access to care to folks on the ground. And the best example that I can provide for that, of course, is the COVID Convention Center testing protocols that we stood up here in Baltimore City. It was a world-class operation in which We chose not to ask people for a credit card, ask people for their insurance information. We as the attorneys, as the business folks, helped figure out the funding mechanisms on the back end. And that decision not only saved lives, but also, of course, saved money. And so, today, I will take these skills that I use every single day in my day job, and I will match them with the very real experiences that I had teaching at Patterson High School, doing home visits, being an assistant coach on the baseball team. I can talk with legitimacy on these issues, not only because I'm doing the work as a professional, but because I've committed my career, my ideals, and my time here in Baltimore City to addressing these facts. And I know, of course, that I'm a relative newcomer to the political scene. I haven't gone to all the dinners and done the glad handing. And I look forward to working with every single person because it's the work that I do today. And I'm so excited to do that work if elected as your next delegate.
Okay, thank you. Next is Robin Lewis.
Thank you. So looking over the question, just making sure what you guys are asking about tactics to direct resources to the city. Seems to me this is a question about the legislative process and has less to do with the individual delegates' personal qualities and a lot more to do with political power. I'll mention that one of the forces that has not only protected Baltimore, but ensured that we got our fair share of blueprint dollars, highway user revenue dollars, et cetera. The most important force is the leadership in the House and Senate that comes from Baltimore. We have in our favor the Senate president as a member of the Baltimore City delegation. It doesn't get much more powerful than that. Senator Ferguson has ensured at every turn to keep the priorities of Baltimore City's people at the forefront. So that is incredibly important and beyond the scope of work of an individual delegate. I also will give credit, immense credit, to Delegate Maggie McIntosh, who served as the chair of the Appropriations Committee for many years, who not only made sure that we moved Kerwin out, the blueprint, et cetera, in Baltimore's favor, but also that we got that additional $800 million in our pipeline this year. Leadership is important. Sending back strong, effective, competent delegates and senators is absolutely essential and beyond the scope of an individual. That said, it's also really important who you send. And I think when it comes to moving bills that favor our city, fighting Republicans who hate us, and negotiating with our good faith friends and partners in other jurisdictions, I've done that successfully. Delegate Klippinger has as well, and will continue to do that as your delegates in the future.
Thank you. And next we will hear from Luke Klippinger.
As the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, one of the 6 standing committees in the House of Delegates, I get to be on the Speaker's leadership team. And it's vital that the city of Baltimore has a voice on the Speaker's leadership team. And I have been proud to be one of the city's voices on the leadership team for the last 4 years. Maggie McIntosh, who is the chair, was the chair of the Appropriations Committee, is not going to be running for re-election. She, I think, showed me in a lot of ways the pathway forward to being a good chair and to making real progress on so many different issues. Whether it was the vote that I got to cast to build new schools all the way across the city in the 21st century schools, including the school at Patterson, where we were hearing those same concerns about cold and freezing classrooms, the blueprint so many other things, but she also gave me the opportunity to lead when we passed the same-sex marriage bill in 2012. It was an extraordinary opportunity as someone, as an out gay man, to have that opportunity in the legislature and to take the lead. That was because Maggie was there. And that was because we had strong Baltimore voices in leadership. And so now with Maggie stepping aside, I have the opportunity to be Baltimore's voice in the House on important issues, whether it's education or public safety or the environment, any number of different issues. And I look forward to working on those issues with people in the district and across the state to help them understand the challenges that we face in Baltimore, as Delegate Lewis and I do all the time, explaining and showing people the challenges that we face in Baltimore, showing our needs and demonstrating here are the ways that we're going to go forward to fix some of these problems in Baltimore and across the state, because there are similar problems in different parts of the state that we share, whether it's in Baltimore City or Allegheny County, particularly on school funding, I should say. So we have a lot more to do. We have a lot more to do that will require standing up and being counted for the values that we hold dear, whether it's related to guns, whether it's reforming our juvenile justice system, whether it's fighting climate change. These are all things that we have to stand strongly on. And it requires that leadership and those relationships that I have and that I look forward to continuing to use going forward as a member of the House of Delegates.
Okay, and next is Augusta Christensen.
So I just wanted to say thank you for this question, because this question is everything. It's the crux of everything. It's why I decided to run. You know, Baltimore, we get maligned a lot. We get scapegoated a lot for the rest of the state, and we're kind of always in a tug of war with resources that often seem to get stripped out of the city and sent elsewhere in the state. But we're the heart of Maryland. Baltimore is the heart of Maryland, and there is no future for Maryland that doesn't include a thriving Baltimore. Our fate is tied to the rest of the state and vice versa. Obviously, the perfect example of this issue that comes to mind, I think, for everyone is the cancellation of the Red Line, which we discussed earlier. Canceling this project, it compounded a lot of challenges that we already face in the city, and it has certainly contributed to the population loss that we've experienced in the last decade. And we know that we need to invest in the city infrastructure, in our public transport, in our schools, and in violence prevention. We know that we need these investments for our city to thrive, but there is significant resistance, not just from what I call the suburban fear bubble, which is kind of the red area where I grew up around the city, and not just in more conservative rural areas, but also there is resistance from affluent blue areas like Montgomery, Prince George's, and Howard counties. I've worked behind the scenes in politics for a long time, so I've been in a lot of closed door meetings as a staffer, listening to people kind of game out the, Baltimore losing some political power and losing population, and how that can be turned to the advantage of other jurisdictions. But I can promise you this: if you send me to Annapolis, I will enter every room and every conversation with the mindset of, how does this help Baltimore? What does this do for the city? I have a lot of great existing relationships with members of the assembly across the state for my work as a fundraiser, and I plan on leveraging those relationships and working relentlessly to bring everyone around to fighting for Baltimore, because like I said, our fates are inextricably linked, and as goes Baltimore, so goes the state of Maryland.
Okay, and we will move on to the next question.
All right, so in your opinions, where might state resources be directed to support the judicial system in Baltimore?
Okay, and I'm sorry, I just have to wait for my randomizer to do its thing here. Okay, here we go. And all right, so as you see here, we will first hear from Luke Cliffinger.
Well, I'm going to get all the judiciary questions first. Okay, that's fine. As the House Judiciary Committee Chair, but having said that, there are a lot of different ways that we can support our judicial system. And I believe that the focus of the question is meant on our courthouses and what we and the services that they provide. So I'll touch on a few things. One thing is something that we don't talk about very much at all, but it's becoming an acute issue and it's been an acute issue, I think, for a long, long time. We are at a point where we probably need to consider building or renovating a building to be the circuit court courthouse. This has been something that the judiciary, the Maryland judiciary, has been talking about for some time. There are significant safety concerns that need to be addressed within the courthouse. That it's either going to cost money to keep it in its place, or we may look at other buildings to be able to address some of those issues. I'll repeat something that Delegate Lewis said a moment ago. In the Judiciary Committee that I run, we were able to pass $2.5 million for her legislation to create a jobs court program. And that is an innovative program that says, if you're going to be on probation, we're going to put you into intensive job training, intensive work to make sure that you have a job, as she put it quite well, that serves as a vaccine to committing further crime. There are other specialty courts that also we can support within our judicial system, whether it's with people who have mental health issues, or of course drug court, something that has been successful across the city and across the state. There's a really in the weeds thing. It's called MDEC. It is electronic filing for attorneys. That's going to be really important. It is on its way to Baltimore, and they'll be merging 9 databases together to put the previous data into this database. But at the end of the day, in about a year or so, it's going to enable us to have better access to the data that goes through our court system, make it easier for people to access that publicly available data, and make life a little bit easier, not just for attorneys, but for anybody participating in the criminal justice process. We've also done quite a bit on access to justice issues, and I've worked with the Attorney General on access to justice issues and lowering the barriers for access to justice, whether it's in encouraging people to serve as pro bono attorneys, or in making more attorneys available for eviction cases and for other emergent needs that people have when they're facing eviction or any number of other things. So there's a lot that we have to do.
Okay, thank you. And next will be Vince Andrews.
Well, that's a tough act to follow after the premier expert in the state of Maryland answering the question. So I'll give it a shot here. You know, I fundamentally believe that our judiciary is currently unfortunately a cog in the wheel, in that cases administration isn't flowing as quickly as it needs to. And it's because it's under-resourced, it's understaffed, the buildings are unsafe. And so we need to acknowledge that the justice delayed is justice not served. Having worked on access to justice issues while I was in law school here in Baltimore City, having one of my former students who went through the justice system, we know that sometimes it takes over a year. Now, because of the pandemic, sometimes 2 years to get a case from arrest to trial. And that's unfair for the victim. That's unfair for the person who may be sitting in jail, presumed innocent. And this is an issue, again, that for some reason, Baltimore City gets blamed. And it's not a Baltimore City problem. These are absolutely under the purview and the jurisdiction of the governor of Maryland and the state legislature. And though folks who live in Montgomery County and Howard County don't see the effects of this slow judicial process, they must be part of the solution. And that means, of course, fully funding our judges and the staff that are required to make sure that the administration of cases gets done effectively and efficiently. It means fully funding the access to justice points that Delegate Clippinger just mentioned at the end of his conversation, where a person must have access to an attorney. A person cannot just be sitting in jail for days on end in violation of their constitutional rights without adequate representation. And these things are extremely pertinent and relevant to our public safety issues, because when cases aren't administered, when folks do not connect the action that they cause with a judicial consequence, an appropriate one, not one that leads to be them being put in jail forever, but an appropriate level of consequence. If you don't connect those two things, then habits and actions won't change. And that's why this is such an important issue. So thank you for posing this question.
Okay, thank you. And next we will hear from Robin Lewis.
Thank you. One of the things I'd like to highlight at the beginning of my answer is the importance of talented team members. And just let me thank Delegate Klippinger, Chair of Judiciary, for being a colleague that I can go to when I have questions about the law, the judicial system, and criminal justice. He's a great asset, and we need him in the legislature. That said, one of the biggest problems with the implementation of justice in our city has to do with the functioning of some really critical city agencies. Again, these are under the purview of the Baltimore City Executive, that is the mayor. However, I'll mention them so that the context is well understood. There are a couple of really important city agencies. One of them is the Sheriff's Department, the Sheriff's Office. It currently is very poorly run, and I'm being generous in my description. The fact that warrants aren't executed and bad guys aren't taken off the street is one of the reasons why we have the sustained churn of violent crime in our city. We need a better functioning sheriff's office. That would help our judicial system run better. And it's in your hands as voters to choose a better sheriff. And that's just my personal view. I'm speaking for myself, not the team. In addition, another really important component of the city's judicial system is the clerk of court's office. The clerk of court is an elected position, and it just so happens that the clerk of court's office is running very ineffectively at this moment. That is an administrative entity. When it fails, a lot of the other wheels that roll along also are impeded. So as voters, it's in your hands to choose a better city clerk of court so that the wheels of justice run more smoothly. Lastly, I'll just mention another component in our justice system, and that is the Office of the Public Defender. Public defenders are attorneys who serve the needs and defend the rights of people who've been charged with crime. We tried to pass a collective bargaining bill that would give our public defenders the right to organize on their own behalf. Now, that did not pass this year, but I think if we have public defenders who are well paid, who have agency and control over their working conditions and salaries, the system of justice in our city will be better served.
Okay, thank you. Next, we will hear from Augusta Christensen.
So I have to echo everyone else here and say, I don't know that I have much more that's more valuable than the chair of judiciary that we're lucky enough to have with us tonight. But I will say we need to ensure that our judicial system in Baltimore and across the state is fair, equitable, and transparent. And state resources really need to be devoted to that end. Like Robin just brought up, we are dealing with catastrophic staffing vacancies in every state agency, and that includes the judicial system, and that includes the Office of the Public Defender. This creates a backlog, it creates burnout. It's incredibly frustrating for everyone. And I would most like to see our state resources directed to paying public defenders and the social workers who work in the Office of the Public Defender competitive salary and benefits so we can fill these staffing vacancies and the related agencies with staffing vacancies as well. Now, I think we also need to focus our resources on victim services, on pre-release services, recidivism, folks coming in, and move the education and traffic completely online. Right now, you can pay your fines online. You can't actually, argue not guilty or PBJ or anything like that. In jurisdictions like DC, you can actually do all of this online, which is a lot more efficient. Delegate Klippinger also mentioned MDEC. We need to move to digitizing a lot of state agencies, including within the judicial system. I also support jobs courts, drug courts, and successful creative ways to approach nonviolent crimes and make sure that we're giving people the skills that they need to not reoffend. All this is incredibly important. Governor Hogan wanted to close multiple pre-release facilities. I think we should be investing in those facilities and really giving folks the resources they need to come out and not reoffend.
Okay, and next is Mark Edelson.
Yes, you got it, man. Excellent. So, yeah, the first thing that we have to do here to improve the judicial system is really beef up our warrant apprehension, which Delegate Lewis mentioned. I mean, there are just far too many violent offenders with open warrants who are currently walking the streets because our warrant apprehension backlog is so long. And I'm happy to take it a step further than Delegate Lewis on this and say, my good friend Sam Cogan, who is running to be our next sheriff, has some excellent ideas on ways in which the sheriff's office can assist with getting through our warrant apprehension backlog. And I would love the opportunity to bring together the resources to support that effort. The other, as I should have suspected, I was beaten to the punch on by Delegate Klippinger, which is that not having an electronic filing system in the city of Baltimore has been a huge issue for our ability to move trials through the system. And I think that other than Delegate Klippinger, I'm the only active trial lawyer here. And I can tell you that it is a slow and awful process getting through the courts in Baltimore City. And when we have e-filing, it is going to make a massive difference for everybody involved. And the final thing that I would love to try and work on is improving the jury experience. I mean, I get called for jury duty every single year, and I love it as my civic duty, particularly as an immigrant. I'm absolutely honored to do it. But the experience itself is miserable. I mean, the Wi-Fi sucks. The amount that you get is not even enough to cover most people's bus fare to get to the courthouse. And the experience is not pleasant, and it disincentivizes people from wanting to carry out their civic duty. And so certainly we need a clerk of court in place who's going to be working towards making a better jury experience, but they're going to need resources to do it. And I believe that in partnership with our state legislature, we can put together some resources to make that experience much more pleasant and incentivize more people in Baltimore City to want to be on a jury and take an active role in the effective administration of justice.
Okay, and then we have Sean Burns.
Thank you. Not to beat a dead horse, but I can't underscore enough the importance of fully funding our parole and probation department. Again, to monitor the risk of those at risk of committing crimes and being a victim of a crime, really filling those vacancies. As I mentioned before, I was a law clerk for Judge Howland. Once a month, the VOP docket was literally a stack like this. It was absolutely ridiculous. Granted, it was 20 years ago, and I hope that is not the case. Mark mentioned e-filing, being more efficient with that. When I was a litigator with Peter Angelos, the asbestos docket was actually electronic filing, being more efficient with the resources that we have. But as I mentioned before, really scaling up programs. Even though it's a pilot program, it's yet to take effect. But the Behind the Wall initiative, when that funding ends in 2026, taking a look at whether we dedicate state resources to that program or we reach out to our federal partners to secure that funding again, whether it's through DOJ or some act of Congress, through another large package like the American Rescue Plan. So those are the things that I will seek to do to continue the great programs that we have. Thanks to the Jobs Corps program at Delegate Lewis, kudos to you for getting that through, and Chairman Clippinger as well. So it's really building upon the progress that we made thus far.
Okay, thank you. And before we move to the next question, I just want everybody to know that the candidates know this, but there are going to be 2 more questions and then the closing statements. So just in case you're wondering how much time we have left, that's to give you a little idea. So go ahead, if you could read question number 5, please.
Okay, how could you as state delegate make progress on fulfilling the Patterson Park master plan, as well as improve green spaces within other neighborhoods across the district and with throughout Baltimore City?
Okay, and this time up first is going to be Mark Edelson.
Great, thank you. So the first that I would do is draw on my experiences as president of the Canton Community Association.
You asshole!
I guess whoever that is doesn't love that experience. In that
hacked.
role, I have worked on the master plan of the Canton Waterfront Park and of Dipsky Park. Those are 2 pretty big expansion projects that we've worked on in Canton. Dipsky Park has taken a significant amount of time, but we are nearing the finish line on that, which I'm very excited to report. And like I said, we've worked on a master plan for the Canton Waterfront Park. Patterson Park is the oldest public park in the city of Baltimore. And it is one that it really deserves our resources, our time, and our energy. And I think the number one thing that we can do as a delegate is bring funding to fund the kinds of programs that we want to see happen and the improvements to the park to actually fund the master plan. At the end of the day, most of the recommendations are going to involve funding, and I think that that's really where our primary role can be. Also, we can be bringing energy to these projects and be giving them a platform and be working to build a coalition to make them successful. But in order to implement what we're going to want to see happen with Patterson Park and all of our green spaces in the city, because let's face it, those are our backyards. In an urban environment like Baltimore City, our green spaces, our public parks are our backyards. And so we have to be focused on protecting them, preserving them. That's going to take funding. And as a delegate, I look forward to doing that.
Okay, and next is Vince Andrews.
Yeah, I mean, again, tough act to follow after Mark on this question. I really do think that Patterson Park is an incredible asset to the city. I used to live on Rochester Place, which is just in the L of the big park and the little park. Having run multiple marathons in Baltimore, I've trained in the park and really on the entire urban trail network that we have here in Baltimore City. And I think the best way to fulfill the master plan, both for Patterson Park as well as I think the urban park network and system that we have in Baltimore, which is actually very robust, especially relative to other cities. Every little neighborhood from Federal Hill to Cherry Hill to Brooklyn has a park. And so the way we can do that is by leveraging existing dollars that are needed to continue to address so many of the other issues that exist. And so you improve and implement the master plan at Patterson Park and all these other parks as well by tying it into the public safety piece and the need to keep our kids engaged. And at 2:30, kids should be going to the park, doing a basketball program, a baseball program. They should be using a green space for art. They should be using a green space to practice chess. And you can implement and I think improve the infrastructure of our park system by tying it directly into so many of these other systemic issues that we, of course, on a daily basis are talking about. I mean, we spend so much time talking about on this call. And as a member of the board of my neighborhood association, I've worked incredibly hard to improve. I live in the Federal Hill area, to improve Federal Hill Park. Tomorrow, actually, I'm joining a meeting to improve Solo Gibbs Park, because it's a park that's been neglected for many years. And it's actually been used as a transient place just for people going to the football game and the Ravens game, and the Orioles game. And so, this is an issue that's close to my heart. I'm doing work on it tomorrow. So I look forward to taking those real experiences that I've had over many years here in Baltimore to fully fund and really improve the incredible urban park system that we have already.
Okay, thank you. Before we move to the next candidate, I do want to apologize to everybody for that disruption. I don't know who that was. We have kicked her out, so hopefully we're not going to have that happen again. And we're going to just try to keep moving things forward. So sorry about that. And our next speaker will be Sean Burns.
Well, just to expand on what has already been said, this is an area where I would work with our partners, whether it's local partners, private partners, but also our federal partners. As the Delegate Lewis, Chairman Clippinger knows, the bond bill process is a way to actually get state funding to help our parks and making sure we have expanded green space, but also through our federal partners with our members of Congress. They brought back earmarks. House members, they have a cap, but senators, they're unlimited. So that's the experience and that I bring to the table, understanding and knowing that process. And that's just a way of moving the ball forward, so to speak, to make sure we have expanded green spaces throughout our district, throughout the city. And that's what I would employ as your next delegate.
Okay, thank you. And next is Augusta Christensen.
So Patterson Park is one of the greatest treasures that we are fortunate enough to have in the district, and we need to fully invest in the improvement and long-term maintenance of green spaces all across District 46. Actually came straight here from Patterson Park. I was attending the Adelante Latina end of year fiesta, which was great. We had a bit of a picnic table shortage problem in the pavilion, but besides that, it was really lovely. And one of the things that I like most about the master plan is that it balances the need for historic preservation as the oldest park in the city with the need to modernize the park, make it more accessible for everyone. It's an incredibly ambitious plan. It covers everything from the lighting to a park ranger program. And I really think the end result is going to be a park that continues to be an incredible asset to our neighborhoods, but also, a great asset in attracting new visitors and new events, creating new traditions within the district. So like so many opportunities we have here in the city, the biggest roles that the state legislature plays in the improvement of our parks and green spaces are funding and oversight. I'm always going to prioritize our green spaces when it comes to budgeting. I'm going to fight to fully fund the master plan while we work with the city to ensure that various agencies in charge of implementing the plan are fully staffed. And it's also important that every new park project that is approved and funded, we also have to allocate an equal amount of money to long-term park maintenance. This is something that gets overlooked a lot, and we can save a lot of these spaces from disrepair by making maintenance plans in advance and securing maintenance funding in advance, because it's not just about implementing the plans, it's about keeping these spaces beautiful, clean, and safe for generations to come.
Thank you. Next is Luke Clippinger.
One of the things we do get to do, as you've heard this evening, is we get to work on the bond bill system in the General Assembly and use capital money to help support our parks. And I've been proud to stand with Delegate Lewis and Delegate Learman and the Senate President, Senator Ferguson, as we brought back a large amount of money. This year, nearly $50 million in support for our parks. And over the last 4 years, well over $100 million in support for our many, many beautiful parks across the district. Patterson Park, of course, is the heartbeat of Southeast Baltimore. It has strengthened the communities all around it. And a story that one of my colleagues in the past used to tell, Delegate Hammond, used to talk about how they knew that they were going to be able to build up those neighborhoods immediately around the park through the work that they did to support Patterson Park. It had a direct impact, and we see that direct impact all the way across the district. So we have been working very hard. We got $2.7 million in capital funding for Patterson Park in the last budget, $500,000 more dollars for the Youth Development Park in Cherry Hill, which, if you haven't been to Reed Bird Potee, is a phenomenal facility that is going to be a real game changer in Cherry Hill. $500,000 in O'Donnell Heights Park, part of the new development that we've been supporting along with the city, that's bringing new housing into that area. $300,000 for the Conkling Street Garden on Conkling Street in the unit block, where they have been just a labor of love for community members for so long. $300,000 for the Longhouse in Latrobe Park in Locust Point. $250,000 for Faring Braybrook Park. $100,000 for the goats in Filbert Street Garden. Don't ever underestimate the goats. The goats are important. $100,000 for the goats. Well, not all for them. Can't buy that much lettuce. $1.6 million for lighting and pool improvements at Riverside Park. We should have mentioned with Patterson Park, a lot of that money is going to support the improvements that need to get made to the kiddie pool at the pool there. And then $3 million to start the next phase of work at Rash Field Park, which, if you haven't been there, one of the important parts of that for me has been Jake's skate park. Susan Young, who is a neighbor here in Riverside, her son was tragically killed as part of when a person who was driving distracted hit their car. That park now is Jake living on, and it made me very, very proud to support the initial $1 million and to sponsor the initial $1 million for Rashfield Park, and to support the ongoing work that we're going to do there. There's always more to do, but we stand in a good place to get the work done to bring more money back for our parks.
Okay, thank you. And next we have Robin Lewis.
Thanks, Ernest. So I'll answer this question from the perspective of a person who's a founding board member of the Friends of Patterson Park. I served on the board of the Friends from 2002 to 2006, ending as the board secretary there. And during my tenure on that board, we created the Moonlight Pagoda event. We restored the boat lake and the fountain. We created the free summer concert series, partnered with the Creative Alliance to create the Great Halloween Lantern Parade, and so many other initiatives. My heart is in that park. I chose to live in Baltimore because of that park, to stay here because of that park. And when the master planning process really took off, finally, I was hopeful that we'd end up with a vision that embodied all the dreams and hopes of the surrounding communities, and that would be a model to inspire other park groups around the city. It's been a little frustrating, like most planning processes, and we're not where we want to be. But I want to thank Delegate Klippinger for enumerating the incredible success we've had in bringing money back as your state delegates, bringing money back for Baltimore City's park system. I want to also remind everyone that we have this little thing called Program Open Space, a statewide funding mechanism for parks across the state, which both Delegate Klippinger and I have supported, and will continue to do that. But it's going to take the community rising up and demanding that the master plan get implemented. And I look forward to working with all of you to make sure we get the best out of our vision for the park.
Okay, thank you. We will now read the last question.
Okay, final question. The daily influx of people from the county to work in the city causes a highway effect on our streets, such as Fayette and Orleans. There's routine gridlock on Eastern and Alisana, and dangerous intersections between these areas. As state delegate, how could you ensure that all of our streets are safe for pedestrians?
Okay, and first to answer this question will be Vince Andrews.
Yeah, I mean, we have to build a Baltimore city that is designed for the people who live, work, and play here in Baltimore. We can no longer design our metropolitan spaces to shuttle people, from the downtown core out to far-flung areas in the state when they, as they guzzle, CO2 emission machines and do so unsafely. That's why I specifically moved to the Federal Hill area so I could walk to work. And crossing Pratt Street, going from my house to near the Lexington Market area where our offices are is a dangerous task. And so we need to fund the Complete Streets infrastructure plan that is laid out for Baltimore. And we need to acknowledge that the state of Maryland benefits, and folks who don't live in Baltimore City, folks who don't pay Baltimore City property taxes, benefit from the infrastructure that they're using and that they're actually degrading as they're driving too fast down our streets. And so it's really a matter of advocating for equitable transportation funding. And obviously, Delegate Klibinger announced the increase in state tax dollars to fund the highways. And we got to make sure that that funding goes towards diversifying the infrastructure so that we aren't just relying on one person sitting in a car, traveling 30 minutes to get to work and back home. We've got to fund mass transit. We've got to connect our current transit models so that when you want to get on the light rail, there's a bus stop that's convenient, and we don't continue to build public transportation systems that aren't well interconnected. And I think the best example of that is the fact that we don't have an east-west corridor for bikes. We don't have an east-west corridor for dedicated bus lanes. And it's a tough issue. We're going to have to figure out how to dedicate space on our streets to make that happen. And really, I think that looking into the future, 10 years, maybe even 5 years, with the rise of autonomous vehicles, with the rise of the most advanced route tracking software that we've ever seen. That's what Amazon uses to deliver our packages. There's no reason why Baltimore City cannot be at the very forefront of these new technologies so that then we can encourage our residents to get rid of their cars, which I hope to do. My 2007 Saab has got to go. And we can follow the example of Delegate Lewis to use, ride shares, get rid of their cars, and stop storing these massive pieces of technology on the curbside. We've got to move towards a mass transit model, and these are things.
Okay, I'm sorry, and sorry about that. That's the time. And next is going to be Luke Klibinger.
We all go door to door quite a bit, and for the times that I've gone door to door, there are streets that I know that I need to be very, very careful if I think I'm going to cross them. And if I'm going to cross them during rush hour, I consider changing my plans a little bit and going to places that are safer. The challenges that we have with pedestrian safety across the city are real. Delegate Lewis and I see consistently issues that come up, and I can point to an issue that I had just 2 blocks from here at Webster and Fort, where cars would routinely speed through the intersection. We still have problems with people who don't pay attention to the stop sign there. And so what it requires is a more holistic approach in complete streets that allow space for bikes, for pedestrians and other people to be able to safely traverse our city. And it is our city. And so one of the ways that we're going to do that, as was mentioned just now by Vince Andrews, was by getting more money from the state, which is what we've done. From fiscal 24 to 27, we've gotten another $320 million. Money that we should have been receiving, we were not receiving from the Transportation Trust Fund. We've gotten that money, and it can be used not only for curb cuts, but for other things that can really help make make things safer for everyone across Baltimore who wants to bike, who wants to walk, and who wants to get there safely. Of course, the issues about how that money is spent is still going to be a city issue. It's an issue that that the city has to take priority with. But this again is where I get to talk about being a part of a team, because Delegate Lewis has worked very, very hard with the Department of Transportation to build those better options, to consistently build better options that are safer for bicyclists. And while I do own a car, I can't say that I'm car free. She brings that unique perspective where no one else in the legislature has, as being completely car free. And that, I think, is an important voice to have in Annapolis. So again, it's bringing back the resources and standing strong with the city to make sure that they do what's right to make our streets safer.
Okay, thank you. Next is Augusta Christensen.
The future of Baltimore cannot be centered on cars. We need safe, accessible streets for pedestrians, cyclists, buses, and regional rails. I've been in similar situations to Delegate Clippinger and Delegate Lewis, that when I've been canvassing on Fayette and Orleans, crossing Orleans Street is a real challenge, and it is dangerous. People drive incredibly fast in these areas, and commuters are simply not used to the number of pedestrians that come with driving through an urban neighborhood. We have a very pervasive car culture here in Baltimore, and a lot of that stems from the lack of reliable public transportation. A lot of that stems from the lack of an east-west transportation corridor. And unfortunately, that problem exists because of over a century of deliberate racist city planning. And we're still, working to undo these effects and get to the public transportation system that we deserve. Our sidewalks are in disrepair. Sometimes they just end, or they're cut off by construction projects. And there are just simply too many cars bottlenecking throughout the city. Because of this, I'm a huge proponent of the complete streets approach to road development and safety. This includes road diets, it includes expanding bike lanes and pedestrian access, lighted crosswalks, and increased enforcement of residential speed limits and moving violations. Speed cameras just went up on I-83. I think there are a lot of places where we can curb dangerous driving with similar enforcement methods. And of course, bringing a regional rail system to Baltimore and improving the reliability and efficiency of our bus system will be a huge help. The number one impediment to reducing car dependency is a lack of other viable options. We also need to expand and modernize the MARC train system so it's easier to navigate not just to DC, but to the rest of the state by rail. We're at an inflection point on this issue, given the infrastructure money that's going to be coming into Maryland and into Baltimore from the federal government. So I'm really hopeful, and I'm really excited that we can tackle these challenges head on. And I'm looking forward to working hard to meet those opportunities.
Okay, and next is Robin Lewis.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn my volume up because this is one of my pet issues, my bête noirs. I'm so happy that everybody loves complete streets. I was working on complete streets before it was cool. As Delegate Clippinger mentioned, I am the only car-free member of the entire General Assembly. I got rid of my car in 2014 because construction on the Red Line was slated to begin the following year, and I figured I didn't need a car, and no one should need a car, be dependent on a car if they live in a city. So I was pretty excited about that liberation, which didn't come. But around that time, I also got involved in working on complete streets. Back in 2011 or so, I was a volunteer member of the Southeast Complete Streets Work Group. And as a member of that group, I participated in a process that developed a design plan for complete streets. This was before Baltimore City even had a complete streets resolution, much less ordinance. The city of Baltimore does now have a complete streets ordinance. It is, as best I'm aware, the only such law in the entire state. That gives us a humongous advantage. The vision that I and other neighbors had a decade ago could be realized with that law. However, there's no money for it. And I'm proud to tell you that this year, after working really hard for 4 years, I was able to pass, with Delegate Clippinger and Senator Ferguson's support and Delegate Learman's support, a bill that will fund Baltimore City's Complete Streets Plan. That bill will take all of the revenue, well, it will allow the city to take all of the revenues from traffic camera citations, red light speed, vehicle height monitoring, et cetera, all of those citation revenues, and plow them back into Complete Streets, which means that the city now will have money. We estimate maybe $2 million or more a year, depending on how much suburbanites, suburban computers speed through our city. We'll have money to pay for curb cuts and intersection bump outs and bike lanes and dedicated bus lanes, and all that we dream of and deserve to have can now be paid for. And that took your delegates working together to make it happen. I care about Complete Streets. I created a Livable Streets Coalition of neighbors working on that. I will continue working on it. I could go on without end when it comes to Complete Streets, but I'll give you guys a break because it's late. Thank you for listening.
All right, and next is Sean Burns.
Delegate Lewis, I'm going to follow your lead because there's no need in beating a dead horse. I think we're all in agreement. We need investments in mass transportation. I alluded to the fact that if it wasn't for investments in the MARC train, I wouldn't have the opportunity to work on Capitol Hill. We need investments in traffic calming measures as well. We definitely want people to come into our city to spend money, but to actually relocate here as well. So if I'm elected as your delegate, I will work along. And let me just say this one point too, and I'm very serious about this. You know, Delegate Lewis, Chairman Clippinger, I am not running against them. I want to be a part of the new Team 46. So I want to be a part of that new team, and you can rest assured as a delegate, I will be working diligently to make sure we have mass transit, restore whatever version you want to call the red line, to make sure we have an east-west connection, because it's important. The reason why I live downtown, because I like to walk. I like to walk to the cleaners. I like to walk to get something to eat. So there's no need for me to beat the dead horse. I think we're all aligned on this issue.
Okay, and then we have Mark Edelson.
It's safe. I guess it's safe. I'll just say, I think I caught the name of the person who is clearly not a big fan of mine. And let me just say, if anybody is unsure as to the level of anger in Canton over the removal of the O'Donnell statue, there's your answer. On the pedestrian question, we've actually dealt with this issue a lot in Canton, specifically on the Boston Street corridor from 95 to Alisana and Fleet. And I'm just going to say that solving this challenge has required a broad coalition of community leaders, dedicated and persistent community members, our councilman's office, our representatives from DOT, and our state delegation. And I'll say that we are confident that through a combination of traffic calming measures like streetscaping, defined medians, red light cameras, and speed cameras, we will have success in making this corridor and these intersections much safer and more pedestrian friendly. So as our delegate, I would draw on my very specific experiences in working on these exact issues as community association president in order to improve pedestrian safety. However, the question appropriately states the scale of the challenge when you ask how we can make all streets safe for pedestrians. This is an area that I have been working in for many years now. Organizations like the Baltimore Transit Campaign, Transit Choices, and Get Maryland Moving, where I have focused my efforts on advocating for a true multimodal, connected, reliable, and safe transit system throughout the city, the primary focus of which is moving people around, not moving cars around. And as Delegate Lewis can tell us more than anybody, this work takes a long time to have success on. We can all sit here tonight and talk about the buzzwords, but to actually have success in this area, it takes years and years of dedicated work. Public transit is and always has been a centerpiece of my campaign, because I truly believe that the way to unlock Baltimore's immense potential is through a high-functioning public transportation system, which must include a network of protected walking and bike lanes, prioritizing accessibility and pedestrian safety so that everyone has the ability to access and connect with the unique amenity-rich urban environment that we all live in and love. And finally, let me just say this. Delegates Learman and Lewis in particular have been exceptional advocates and legislators for public transit in our city and our state. A primary motivation for me for running in this position is that whoever wins this seat has got to be ready, willing, and able to take on the role that Delegate Learman has played and partner with Delegate Lewis on day one in this work. It is critical that we continue to shift our culture away from planning for single occupant vehicles to a culture that plans streets and sidewalks and neighborhoods for people. And that is why I am running for the seat.
Okay, thank you. We will now move to our closing statements, and we made a little bit of a change to it, but I think candidates, you're going to like it. So if Beth, if you could please read that.
Sure. First of all, thanks to all of you for being here tonight. And we really wish that all 6 of you could win. But given that that's unlikely, if you were not elected, how will you stay engaged in District 46 to improve it, to improve the district? 2 minutes.
Okay. Yes, and give me 1 second. I forgot to hit my randomizer. And yes, as you heard, we are going to be giving you 2 minutes for each of your closing statements, and we will start with Augusta Christensen.
So I love this this updated question, Beth. Thank you so much for that. I had my "What did you learn?" all ready to go, which was, of course, I learned about the goats from Delegate Klippinger. But I will say, if I'm not elected, I will continue to be a member of this community. I will continue to be active in the South Baltimore Neighborhood Association, and I will continue fighting for public transportation, public education, and equity in all forms, because I love this city. The city is my home. I am not going to leave it. I moved around a lot for various campaigns when I was in my 20s, but I always knew this was my anchor. This is my center. This is where I wanted to come home to. So I am in Baltimore for the rest of the time that I'm on this planet. And I am always going to fight for everyone to have, you know, the incredible love and the incredible experiences that I've had in Baltimore, while also being safe and secure and having opportunities regardless of their zip code. So I guess the short answer to this question, how will you stay engaged to improve District 46? In absolutely every way that I can, regardless of the outcome on July 19th. And I really appreciate everyone for putting this together. I think the fact that we have so many people willing to run, willing to engage, willing to put on an event like this and stay to the bitter end of 9:01 p.m., that says it all. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate all of your time.
Okay, and next will be Luke Klippinger.
Well, first, thank you very much for organizing this very unique forum. It's been certainly interesting over the last couple years to go to community meetings on Zoom, do everything on Zoom. And I think this is the first time for me, at least, that I've been at a candidate forum on Zoom. So it's the first time for everything. If I'm not elected, I would look to join my local neighborhood association. I already have joined Riverside, but I'm just saying I'd be able to have a little more time to get involved with the park closer to where I live. But I also would hope to be able to remain involved in a number of other ways that I've been able to get involved with the neighborhoods all the way across the district. But a couple of things come to mind quickly. I certainly hope I'd be able to remain as the judge for the kinetic sculpture race at the American Visionary Arts Museum, because there's really no better show that the city of Baltimore puts on than when we go all over South and Southeast Baltimore with those wonderful sculptures. I also certainly would hope to be able to assist communities in the connections that sometimes they need to make in making sure that Santa is available. I do coordinate some of Santa's visits from time to time, one at the Southeast Community Library, and also another one here in Riverside last year, and I would be happy to continue to coordinate that work with Santa during the holidays. But at the end of the day, the reason that I've been doing this for so long is my love for the city. It's why I came back home. I grew up here. I love the city. It's going to keep getting better, and it'll get better because of the work we're doing in the legislature. So I'd appreciate your support.
Okay, thank you. Next is Robin Lewis.
Thanks. First, let me thank the neighborhood presidents for working together to create a joint forum like this. Please talk to your other neighborhood presidents around the district and ask them to do the same. It's very hard to do 40 individual candidate forums. Thank you. That's my plug. But I really am grateful for the opportunity to come before you and thank everyone who joined this evening for their time. I think that if I am not so fortunate to return to this role, to the honor of my life working for you, I will go back to my usual routine, which was being on every board, being engaged and leading initiatives to improve life for everyone in our community. Remember that for 18 years before I became your delegate, I served in leadership roles in the Friends of Patterson Park as a founding board member. I helped to found the Patterson Park Public Charter School. I'm one of 40 founders. I am a founding board member of the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association. Before me and a couple of friends, it was Baltimore Linwood Association. We rebranded it, rebuilt it in our own image, created a new identity around greening, and I served on the PPNA board for 6 years. I served for 4 years on the Creative Alliance board. I have served for 7 years, the great honor to serve on the Southeast Community Development Corporation board. That's what I did for 18 years before I came to you. And I would continue to do that because I live here and I love it. The last thing that I'll say is every one of us has a role to play. Being an elected official is an incredible honor. It's also very hard work. And I think that as each of you, finish and decide where you'll direct your votes, I hope that you'll send me back because I feel I have so much.
I'm sorry, that's time.
I thank you for
finish your
time.
sentence.
I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. And next is Mark Edelson.
Yeah, this question takes me back to 2015 and 2016. I see Mark Parker on the screen. I'm guessing that he gets some of the chills from this question too, because we were asked this question many times in the city council race in 2016. And what I said at the time was, if I don't win, I'm just going to continue to double down and do more work in this community and the city because I love it. Since then, I became the president of the Community Association. I started the Anti-Racism Alliance. We prevented the demolition of the bike lane. I've taken on many pro bono cases in the city and worked on more initiatives than I can honestly remember in the last 6 years. And the response I give now is exactly the same. This is what I love doing, nights, weekends, when I don't get paid for it. I absolutely love doing everything I can to benefit our communities, our district, and our city. And I'll be doing exactly that, whether I'm a delegate or not next year. And since I have a bit of extra time, I am going to answer the other question that you initially had for us, which is one thing that you learned tonight, although I have two things that I learned tonight. One is that Augusta has an amazing recollection for conversations that she has had with voters in the district. And the second is also directed at you, Augusta. I did not know the very personal reason and motivation for you running in this race, your friend Matt, and I have to say that is a beautiful way to honor his memory and particularly meaningful to me, I have to be honest with you. So that's it. I probably have a couple seconds left. This has been an awesome evening and a wonderful experience. Hopefully we can do it in person sometime soon, but thank you to everyone who put this evening together. I know how much work it takes to make it happen. It's been an exceptional evening and I've really enjoyed every second of it.
Thank you. Next is Vince Andrews.
Yeah, thank you so much to the joint community associations who put on this event. Really an incredible opportunity to be able to talk with you all and learn so much about all the candidates. If I'm not elected, I'll continue to do the work that I set myself upon over a decade ago here in Baltimore, from being a member of the board of my local community association, to helping to improve our local park, to, of course, continuing to match my day job, my career, with the ideals that I want to live and the work that I want to do in Annapolis, from education equity to healthcare equity. It really is something that is what is motivating and driving so much of all the conversations that I had at the doors, which is why I'm losing my voice. And I have the honor to be able to do that amongst this incredibly strong, vibrant community that we have here in Baltimore. And whether I win or not, I also have the honor and really the joy of raising a family here, because my wife and I are expecting our first child in August. And so we're thrilled about that. Can't wait to send them to Federal Hill Prep or any of the local schools. I went to public schools my entire life, so we're making that happen. And otherwise, thank you so much for having me tonight.
Okay, and then we have the last word will be from Sean Burns.
Thank you so much. So to answer your question, I will continue the work that I have been doing, stating back from when I was 14 years old. My passion for public service was sparked shadowing my uncle, former Mayor D. Burns, when he was a city councilman, to council president, to mayor, which sparked me to have an internship with Congressman Kwasi Mfume. And I'm proud to announce that I have his support and endorsement. And then I served as an attorney with the law offices of Peter Angelos. I took a $50,000 pay cut to go work for Governor O'Malley. Prior to that, I worked for Senator Barbara Boxer. I worked for Senator Chris Dodd. I worked for Senator Torricelli from New Jersey. And during law school, I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And then after my tenure with Governor O'Malley, Anthony Brown lost the election. I was unemployed for almost a year. I was being very stubborn, but Congressman Cummings was my dear friend and mentor. He put me on as a counsel in the Oversight Committee, which leads to my current position with the Thurgood Marshall College Fund. And I'm a mentor, a proud mentor. My mentees actually knock on doors with me, and I'm on the board of iMentor. So I'm actually going to continue the work that I have been doing from day one, as a toddler, so to speak, from student government to today. And so I would say to you, when you're going to cast that ballot, think about who's most prepared to serve you as your delegate. And I offer to you, the reason why I'm running is because our dear Brooke Limmer is running for state control, and there's a vacant seat, and I want to be a part of the new Team 46. And I believe I'm best prepared to serve you as your next delegate. And I thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. So that concludes the formal portion of this candidates forum, but if you have a question that you wanted to ask the candidates, or you have something you want to bring up, which you feel was not brought up here, you will have an opportunity. But first, I just want to advise the candidates that if you want to put some information like emails, social media contacts, anything like that, please go ahead and just type that into the chat. And I want to thank my fellow neighborhood association presidents from Butchers Hill, Brewers Hill, Highlandtown, and Upper Fells Point for putting this all together. This really, I think, has been a great evening, and it could not have happened without all of you. So the breakout rooms, if you are watching this on